the conceptual issues, but it's not the methodology itself, but an extension. So we'll cover two things. One is if you have to assess inclusive growth in terms of how the poverty changes due to change in economic growth, how we can analyze the tools using in this context. And the second one, I will touch upon. We have only 1 hour. We don't have 2 hours. I will just touch upon just to show you how this multidimensional tool can be used for impact evaluation. Yeah. Okay. So again, these are the readings. They both were published in 2021. One was on research on economic inequality. The other one was on review of income and wealth. Yeah. So in general, how do we assess inclusiveness of economic growth? How do we link economic growth to multidimensional poverty? Now, as we have already discussed earlier, that you can either look at elasticity or semi-elasticity. Elasticity is more relative, but semi-elasticity, you look at the absolute change and link it to growth. Yeah. Now, in general, in the literature, you can study growth elasticity of poverty in different ways. One is just to look at, just to take cross countries or within a region, put a left-hand side variable poverty, right-hand side variable growth, regress, and interpret the regression estimates. Now, that's kind of give you a variation in left-hand side variable poverty, how much growth is affecting your change in poverty across countries, across time. So you can have panel data analysis, you can have cross-sectional analysis. However you do, you are just linking how much cross-country variation or overtime variation across this region, across countries is affecting your reduction in poverty. You can look at semi-elasticity, but they're not point estimates. You do not look at each region, each country. So if you ask, okay, how much is, how has Uttar Pradesh performed? How has Bihar performed? And so on, you do not get that answer directly because it's just from a regression, you say regression estimates overall, yeah? Then you can try to do point elasticity. Point elasticity means you do country by country, region by region. Yeah? Each country, how it has performed. Now, point elasticity has, there has been a big literature since 1990s also doing both growth as well as point elasticities. But then first, this paper have never got published, so it probably is not available in the public domain. If you want to know about these different elasticity formulation, you have to read the paper we published in 2021 because James never got to publish the paper. I don't think, I'm not aware of it. Yeah. So he developed these tools, but we just used it, we just summarized it and applied it. He presented the theory one. We wrote it with an application on India. Okay, so these are the concepts, basic concepts I'm repeating, but you already know. If you are working with this MPI, this particular global MPI or Indian MPI, however you call it MPI. Then you have H, A, you have already discussed what subgroup decomposition is, dimensional background is, you know all these things at this moment, yeah? So main utility, if you do percentage change as an n variable, say X associated with 1% change in a mean variable, Y between two periods, this is called Y elasticity of X. And how do you compute? We are going to denote it by E. And this is the relative change, both are relative change. And this is how you compound changes between the periods. Okay, it is not just an average change, it's a compound change. So you have, say, even if you do as economic growth, you have, say, 10,000 today, 1%, then you go, wherever you go, then 10% on top of that 10%, or it's a compound growth, right? So between two periods, you do just compound annualized growth. If you want to do, you just use this particular formulation. And when you do semi-elasticity, I denote it by S, small s, but here you have the absolute change per annum. You just look at the change, divide by the number of years over which you are doing, that gives you annualized change. You have elasticity and you have the formulation of semi-elasticity. Sorry? You the first one. This one? Yeah, it's just a different variable notation, but u can be either x or can be y. So instead of writing it x for this, y for this, I just define it for u, where you can take the form of x and y. Yeah? You can. So first, let's look at vertical inclusiveness. So here you are just looking at the relationship between growth and the MPI directly. Yeah. So if you look at the semi-elasticities, then you get absolute change in MPI due to relative change in Y nationally. But then if you add M subscript, it becomes at the regional level. The state and national. Yeah. Same would be the state. Similarly, for elasticity, you can also write the formula. So if you want to study how much MPI has changed due to a change in Y, you can, this is your elasticity. And then you are going to have across regions, you can have regional elasticity. And the question is, how are we going to use them? Yes.
So we have NFHS data not like for after 4 years of a gap in India, while we have growth data per annum for annual. So how do we compare? Like how do we take elasticity into account? Like if we were to calculate elasticity of or elasticity, then how do we do it? Because we don't have data like we have data for different periods for different indicators. For growth, we have annual data, while for NFHS, it is 4 year gap data. So
that's why we annualize the change.
Okay.
If you have between 2005 and 2015, 10 years, so you look at the change, but then you divide by, for absolute, you divide by 10, get the annualized figure.
Okay.
Otherwise, they are not comparable, right?
True.
If you are not comparing, if you are not comparing two different periods, you do not have to adjust for annualized. Okay. But for say example, you are comparing India and Nepal. India has 10-year gap, Nepal has 6 years gap. Unless you annualize, you will not be able to compare. Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is what we got. So we use the data between 2005-6 DHS and 2015-16 demographic health survey. Yeah. So if you look at that, the NPI, the Indian version of the NPI, we got this NPI value of 283 in 2015. It went now to 0.123. This is a change in MPI. Yeah. Age also went down from 55% to 28% around. A also went down from 51 to 43. So if you now try to link, so if these are the annual absolute changes, please note when a variable is in percent, you look at the change, you denote the change in percentage point. The absolute change. So if you have a change from say 20% to 10%, in absolute term, it is a 10 percentage point change, which is not a 10% change. Okay, so that's why it is written PP percentage point. So if you look at the relative change, the change in NPI was 8%. Change in the multiplication headcount ratio was 6.6%. So here you have the elasticities. This is growth semi-elasticity, they are growth elasticity. So these are absolute change on these indicators, divide by the relative change, which is growth, which is over here, 6% annual change. Yeah. And these are growth elasticities. So percentage change divided by percentage will give you growth elasticity. Absolute change divided by percentage will give you semi-elasticity. Can you repeat which part? So growth elasticity is percentage change in NPI 1.34. That means if you have 1% economic growth, that led to 1.34% change in NPI. Semi-elasticity will say that there's 1% growth, you have 0.0027 point reduction in NPI per year. Sounds good? Okay. So how does it fare if we compare with the international income poverty line? So this is how the income poverty headcount ratio was, 38. It went down to 21. Yeah. So a reduction of minus 2.4 percentage point per year. And during that period, the growth was 6.7%. You see why we need to annualize? Because for income poverty, we have a different period. For elevated, we have a different period. So unless you annualize, it's not comparable. Here also, this is growth semi-elasticity of 0.36 and growth semi-elasticity, growth elasticity of 1.21. Now, if you compare, you cannot compare these figures with MPI because they are different measures. MPI is adjusted headcount ratio, so you have to compare like for like. Given that this one is the headcount ratio, $1.9 a day, you have to compare with MPI headcount ratio. So you cannot compare MPI, change in MPI, with income headcount ratio. You have to do like for like. We can only compare with the second row in the table above with the below. So we can see clearly that was in terms of semi-elasticity, given that this one is higher, in terms of growth semi-elasticity, NPI headcount appears to have performed slightly better, but then if you go look at relative, it's slightly different. So you have to look at both side by side. Okay. So now these are how the states have performed. Yeah. So this is India. So this is the national average. So some states have performed better, some states have performed worse. This is growth semi-elasticity. And why looking at both matters, you should not just rely on one. Take the example of Kerala. You see, because Kerala already had very low level of NPI, so the absolute change was small as well. But then, even with the small level of NPI, if you look at growth elasticity, look where Kerala, look where Kerala lies. So even with that very small to start with, its relative change was much larger. I mean, of course, you have to look. I do not have a suggestion for you which one should be better and which one should be worse. They both should be. You should look at both of them for interpretation. Yeah, but you can understand some of the changes will be mechanical. But Kerala, despite being small, they had made sufficient changes to show the change to be much larger. Yeah. Now, let's try to perform some decompositions. So what we are going to see now, okay, for every state, say, you have a change in growth. Because of that growth, suppose you have been able to reduce the headcount ratio. Okay. How much of that reduction, or suppose because of change in growth, you have a change in MPI. But was that change in MPI, was it due to change in multidimensional headcount ratio or change in A? Now the policy question for you. Suppose two states have similar reduction in MPI. Yeah. One state has larger reduction in H, one state has larger reduction in A. Possible, right? Because a different combination. What are the policy implications? How do you see it? The two states, A and B. State A, both of them have reduced MPI similarly. One state has reduced H more, one state has reduced A relatively more. What would be the policy implication? How do you see it?
The other one is more equitable. Second one.
Layman's term, please. What does equitable mean?
It's more distributive policies, like suppose Narega, PDS.
Let's not go that far. I have given you some numbers. NPI, same reduction in NPI, but in one state, H fell further, in another state, A fell further. What are the implications? How do you see it? Very simple terms. Let's try to think. Let's not go to all these policies, just numbers. What do you interpret? How do you interpret these numbers?
One case where A has gone low. This case, the average retribution has lower than in case of Manchester, the percentage of 4 has decreased.
Yes, he can give you that. But what do you mean by that? How do you communicate with the policymakers.
So one state help the people who are just at the bottom of the poverty.
Very good.
Another state helps who are reducing the severity.
Good. So idea is that in layman's term, in one state, H has fallen, maybe A did not much, which means that state has helped those at the very close to the poverty line. So if you have taken them out of the poverty, of course, this number has fallen, but those you have left behind, their situation did not change much. So reduction in M0 was mainly due to the reduction in those least poor. Whereas the other states did not change H much, but A fell because probably those in the poverty, they have been helped. Their situation has improved, although they did not come out of poverty, but their situation has improved. That's kind of the policy implication. So that's why you need to look at these different things, not just after you compute the MPI, you need to look at okay, how they have performed into H, how they perform into. Yeah. So what we could do through elasticity analysis, we can always try to look at that here. So we can see, okay, you have your we can look at the other way around. You have your growth. We can see, okay, let's see how much headcount ratio you have, multidimensional headcount ratio you have reduced. But then has that translated to reduction of NPI? Because if A has not changed, it will not translate to reduction in NPI. Yeah. So let's see this kind of decompositions, what kind of information we can find. So decomposition, what we are doing, we are looking at the change in Y and its effect on change in multidimensional headcount ratio. And then we are going to look at whether the change in multidimensional headcount ratio is linked to change in MPI as well. So we are breaking it down, the entire change. We are looking at change in Y due to MPI, and we are just breaking it down into components. If you have interest, you can do the other way around as well. Let's see what we get. So this is the type we get. So we have, look, state growth elasticity. These are the of state incidence. Okay, so you have these different numbers. Look at Kerala over here. You are doing, if you do relative terms, Kerala is doing really well. Yeah, this is elasticity. This is not semi-elasticity. You can perform with semi-elasticity as well. I'm just showing you some tools. Of course, you can adapt to your own interest. Yeah, but then here you have the state incident elasticity of state MPI. Now, it's not necessary that all the countries they have reduced MPI and H in the same level, the same intensity. Yeah. Again, let me show you another kind of picture, another kind of decomposition. Okay. So this is horizontal inclusiveness. So what we are going to do here, first we will try to see. So we want to understand how the national growth has translated to state MPI reduction. Yeah. This one, so we have two terms. One is semi-elasticity in terms of how much growth is translated to state MPI, and you have state GB per AGB also translating to state MPI. Let's see what we get. We have two, both semi-elasticity and elasticity. So this is going to be our change. So we want to understand how much national growth, how much of the national growth has translated to state MPI reduction. Suppose I'm saying, okay, growth has taken place. Take the example of West Bengal. National growth has taken place, but that has reduced growth in West Bengal. We are going to break it down into two components. We will look at how much of the national growth has contributed to state growth. It is possible that some states are growing faster than national average. Some states that are going to grow slower than national average. And then we will look at whether that growth has been translated to that state's national MPI. Yeah, let's see if I can sort of make you interested in that graph. So we'll both do semi-elasticity and elasticity. Okay, so this graph has state growth, semi-elasticity to state MPI, and this one national growth elasticity to state growth. So how much national growth has translated to state growth versus how much state growth has translated? We just broke it down, yeah, into different components. Okay, so this is semi-elasticity of the state MPI with respect to state growth. Okay? And on this axis, we have EY and Y. That means how much of the national growth translated to state growth. Now what we do, we divide into 4 orthants. Sorry. Okay? Let's take this for example. Let's take the example. This is GJ, Gujarat. Okay? This value is high, but this value is low. It is falling on orthant 3. What would be the implication? This is 1 over here. So if you have a value of here, which is definitely closer to 1.5, right? How do you interpret this axis?
So the state
1 to 1. Say, go ahead.
National growth rate is more effective in the reduction of the state rate.
No, this one, I'm saying what I'm measuring on this axis. So GJ is here. So the value of GJ is say around 1.4. What does it mean on this axis? You wanted to say something?
that the national growth has led to the rise in the state growth, but that state growth doesn't.
No. Just interpret this number. This figure, 1.4. This is 1.4, right? What is this?
The national growth has led to rise in the state growth.
So 1% rise in national growth is accompanied with 1.4% rise in state growth. So Gujarat's growth has been faster than the national growth. Agreed? Let's now read the number over here. This height is much lower compared to other countries, right? What does that mean? Go ahead.
The state growth is not eliminating the other MP, the national state
MPI. So although the state growth of Gujarat has been much faster than national growth, in terms of MPI reduction, in absolute terms, it has not been as fast. It's much lower. That's why you have in orthant 3. Okay? What about, take the example of, say, either West Bengal or UP, take one of them here. What does it mean? They are in that orthant. What about their growth, state growth compared to national growth?
Yes, sir.
Less. So here is less than 1. So in this orthant, state growth has been slower than national growth.
But still they have higher growth reduction in MP.
But that per 1% state growth has led to much larger reduction in state multidimensional poverty. Do you all get that? Truth? Do you understand what we refer here? What do we measure here? What?
Reduction of MPI.
Reduction of what?
MPI. What is
MPI. Yes.
MPI.
Because of?
Go through the state.
Let her speak, guys. It's okay. I know you. Some of you have understood, but let's everyone understand. Let's try it.
I didn't get it.
No, I know, but try it. This is how we learn. Right.
Due to their own state growth, how much they are going to reduce their state MPI.
Exactly. So this is the sensitivity of state MPI,
Yes.
the absolute reduction in state MPI due to 1% state growth. Here you have how much of the national growth, whether the state growth has been faster than national growth. It looks like the state growth has been slower than the national growth. Do you agree with that? But then per unit of this state growth has translated to a much larger reduction in multidimensional poverty. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then you have some countries here which has much, Tamil Nadu included, much faster growth than the national growth, but not necessarily the state growth translated to multidimensional poverty. It gives you another layer to understand this horizontal inclusiveness, where how the national growth has translated to the state MPI through state growth. I'm not establishing a causal relationship here. It is not. But at least that tells you, okay, you have faster growth than the national average. I would expect to have much larger poverty reduction, right? But you can clearly see that has not taken place. So you can have this multiplicative decomposition to understand whether that channelization is taking place or not. I'm not saying it's causal, because there are many factors. Now, the thing is that once you observe it, probably you will try to investigate why didn't it translate? But that gives you the picture. It did not happen. Does it make sense? Questions? Okay. Now, I did it for semi-elasticity. Okay, let's try to do it for elasticity, the relative change. So this is for the relative change, okay? We have three.
What about short-term one in the previous year?
Huh?
What about the short-term smaller in the previous year?
Short-term one I just discussed, no? Short-term one, you have West Bengal and UP. They had much slower growth, but they had much faster reduction in NPI. Yeah. So then you have elasticity. It's a relative change. Yeah. Of course, things will change. For example, Kerala, now Sikkim has come up. Kerala is gone from there. Yeah. But there you go. Again, a consistent player. Faster growth, but even in relative terms, state growth has not translated into state MBA, at least for that period. Again, we have to keep in mind, we have to understand the period, at least during that period, 2005-6 to 2015-16, for our study, that reduction was not there. Let's look at Uttar Pradesh has come down, it's still slightly above, West Bengal is here. So you could see that even despite slower reduction, some states have performed much better. Again, that gives you the picture in front of you. You can at least cross-check how different states are performing and whether these, national versus state versus so on, whether these changes are taking place, whether they're meeting the expectations. And then, of course, you can ask the state why. You can have a separate study for it. Yeah. Louder, please.
What will be the interpretation for Sikkim then? Sikkim is the last one.
Sikkim has grown very fast compared to the national, but then still it is not under this ordinance. Yeah, it is still above this blue line. So I mean, definitely it has not grown. And of course, you have to understand relative. Okay, let's find out Sikkim what they did in terms of absolute. Find out again here. There you go. There you go. So they have done well on both counts, but it's reasonably well. But no, actually not. It is slower. It's below the ordinary. It's same level as Gujarat actually. If you look at Sikkim's performance, but it's interesting, isn't it? How these different states have performed. Who has done well? Who has done not? But there you go. Yeah. But this is the kind of tools that you can get to study, and you can see if the state has improved or performed well or not. But then you can ask. You're all trying to find out the state. Sorry, is abbreviated. I could not put the entire name. It just did not have space. But then you can find, okay, if and then you can question. We observe that it has not happened. Then you go write a separate paper and try to understand what failed. Agricultural failed, manufacturing failed, why it didn't translate, what kind of policies worked, what did not work, and so on. But it gives you the picture, at least, helps you. It gives you a tool to understand whether changes have taken place or not. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, the horizontal blue color line. Yeah,
This line.
Yes.
I just try to divide between high MPI and low MPI, but that may depend on, just to show, there are some above and some below. I do not remember if it was the median change or something like that. I forgot exactly what, but one of those, just to show that some are above, some are low, so that you can see clearly the offense. But this one is clear. One is if it is faster than national versus slower than national.
More national.
Yeah, so if it is more than one, that means your growth, state growth has been more than national growth. Here, your state growth is slower than national growth. Any other questions? Okay.
What about states which are near the average India, near the center point?
Oh, I know. Very good. This line is the India average. Is the overall. This is for India because you have the Indian elasticity. Now I remember. Thank you. Go ahead.
What about the states which are near the average in India?
Just done average. Just perform as India overall is. What do you want me to say?
For example, that I don't know what the abbreviation is.
This one. AP, Andhra Pradesh.
Andhra Pradesh, what can we say that like that?
That's totally up to you. It is just national average. So it has just performed average. AP's growth was exactly the same as the national average, and somehow it is just by chance. I don't think it will happen every year. But by chance, if you just look at the semi-elasticity, AP has just performed as reduction. If you have to look at its absolute its level to start with. So I don't know if AP will be there. So let's draw. But here, AP's relative change is much faster than the India average. That's why you need to look at the semi-elasticity and elasticity side by side. Yeah, but you can see some states, they are consistently performing that versus some states consistently performing. I mean, of course, I'm not doing it just for India. It was main objective was methodological. India was an example. But if you want to study, if you want to break it down, your NFHs or that latest NFHs, they allow you to even break that down into district level.
Other states,
right? So you can have district level estimates. Could be a research paper from one of you. You can break them down at the district level and see district level change has taken place. District level SDP or district level domestic product, I don't think that is available. Lack of data, but at least you can say, even based on the state domestic product, growth in state domestic product, whether it has translated to different districts at different level. And that gives you some idea to explore further why. So probably this is a starting point of a study. You do that, but then you try to defend. If some districts are lagging behind, you probably do a further study why these districts are lagging behind. Okay, but they could be a useful tool to start with. You have a snapshot. Okay. Okay, so that was 35 minutes. I quickly wanted to show you that tools for growth elasticity. We have again 25 minutes. I want to leave some time for Q&A as well. Let me show you how we can study impact evaluation, using this multidimensional tool. So let's look at these three distributions. Now you have seen that again and again, right? But still, I would like to remind you. So you have D represents disadvantage, N represents, or you can say deprivation, not deprivation, however you say it. Yeah. So you have deprivation, no deprivation. So you have 4 people. Yeah. And then you have this indicator. So you can clearly see, suppose you start with this one, start with X. So you can see the first person faces no deprivation. Second person faces 1. Third person faces 2. Fourth person faces 3, right? Now you can have these 2 different timelines again. X1, X2. If you go, in both cases, look, here you have 50% deprivation, 50% deprivation, 50% deprivation, right? Remember when we are looking at the joint distribution of deprivation, same marginal, different margin, and so on, you have 50% deprivations in each indicator, right? And in both cases, deprivation has been reduced by to 25%, 50% to 25% in all indicators. But you can clearly see the difference. So if you have to evaluate the impact between these two periods, which path would you prefer? X1 or X2? X1. Why?
It is more distributed.
X2 is literally leaving this 1% behind. Make sense? Similar changes, but one is leaving. How we can do that using the tools that we have? Yep. So we studied it for one particular cash transfer program. It's in Philippines. So that paper was published in Review of Income and Wealth. So what cash transfer does? Cash transfer saves some conditionalities. Yeah. So if you satisfy as a family that conditionalities, you get the cash. It's fungible. You decide where you want to use. If you don't satisfy, you don't get the money. Yeah, and these are how the conditionalities go. See, they get two types of grants: education grant and health grant. Education grant, children say for 3 to 14 years old, they have to be enrolled and maintain a class attendance rate of 85% per month. So enrolling is not sufficient. You have to attend, and they can check with the school and so on if you are attending or not. For health, there are different things. So for children 0 to 14 years old, you divide them into 0 to 5 and then 6 to 14 and so on. You have to finish all the required vaccination. You have to have monthly weight monitoring for 0 to 23 years old. For 6 to 14-year-old, take deworming pills twice. Yeah, so these are conditions. Similarly, for pregnant women, you have to meet all those criteria. If you meet, you get the money. Otherwise, you do not. Now, what is the objective? Of course, objective is to provide people cash, so that they can improve, come out of income poverty. At the same time, they do not discuss human development perspective, but they discuss human capital perspective. Now, human capital and human development, although they both focus on education, health, and others, but conceptually they are different. Human capital is more about productivity, whether that is increasing your long-term earning or not. That's human capital theory. Human development is different. It's more coming from capabilities perspective. Yeah. Their objective, cash transfer program's objective, is dual objective in that sense: increase the cash flow, at the same time enhance human capital in terms of betterment of education, health, and so on. That's the idea. Yeah. And also change in behavior. Behavioral change, bringing behavioral change is quite crucial. So these are good practices. Pregnant women visiting doctors, children getting immunizations, deworming drug. So they are also trying to bring that good practices, behavioral changes. Okay. So what we want to understand, okay, fine, you are trying to bring these behavioral changes, but it is possible that there are so many different factors, right? You have to comply with so many different things. Are they complying properly? Or to start with, those who had larger number of non-compliances, are they also compliant? Yeah, because they tend to be poor. So literally, we try to understand whether this program was pro-poorest. We talk about pro-poorest, how to target them, right? How do we evaluate them, the effect, using this multidimensional tool? Let me show you what we did very briefly. So, of course, you can see the objective is, to sort of achieve multiple goals at the same time. Good. Okay. So what we did, of course, we could not take look at all the variables at the same time because we did not have data issues and everything. So we were able to choose these 5 indicators: attendance, okay, health visit, deworming, prenatal, and birth delegate. And we just look at these indicators and we try to understand whether, because they're non-compliant, right? They're not compliant, that's why they have been given the incentive so that they comply. So we want to see how much this program, this cache has changed this behavior. If you are not compliant, are they compliant? Okay. So we use the simple counting framework, right? Compliance, non-compliance, compliance, non-compliance. It gives me the count, isn't it? Simple count. Okay. So this is what we observe. Let me just give you the snapshot in one slide. If you want, then we can have conversation, we can have discussion. So first, when we look at these different indicators, so attendance, health, visit, deworming, return, and birth, and you have these different signs, right? So when you look at the impact estimates, they were randomized control trial, the data, yeah, around 1,200 observations, 600 here, 600 there, and so on. So once when we did the estimate, so you can see that these estimates are strictly below, even the confidence intervals, they are strictly below 0. So these estimates are statistically significant. 1, 2, 3. This one is prenatal care, marginally significant, just touching the line. And of course, the fine birth delivery did not have a lot of impact. And you have the control means from where it has changed. The control means are mentioned over there. Yeah, okay. So they were individually. If you look at individually, you could say, okay, they have impacted in the first 4 indicators, the 5th indicator, they did not have impact. Fine. But no one studies the joint deprivations, joint compliances, right? So what we did, same thing that we did, remember in our paper, the slum paper, we presented all the entire distribution. So what we did, okay, we said, okay, look at whether things have changed. Take first k equal to 1. Right? So you have here k equal to 1. This is the M0. K equal to 1, k equal to 2, k equal to 3, k equal to 4, k equal to 5. So this will be intersection. This will be union. So the same thing, the way we had drawn the M0 curve. Remember, for each cutoff, we had drawn the M0 curve. So for each cutoff, we estimated the M0 and saw that there was a reduction in M0. As simple as that. So when k equal to 1, yes, there was a statistically significant reduction in the adjusted headcount ratio. Okay? K equal to 2, reduction. K equal to 3, reduction. K equal to 4 and k equal to 5 did not. No, I leave it to you. What is the intuition? You think? How do you interpret the finding? Louder, please. I cannot hear.
Cash transfer, like they are not going to the hospital for the prenatal and birth delivery.
No, that's you got for the first one. That's fine. There could be various reasons. Let's try to interpret this one. Those are indicator by indicator, some of them may, but let's try to interpret these findings. What do you find? What do you observe? And how do you interpret the results over here? Just what I have done. Again, this is the M0 or adjusted headcount ratio for k equal to 1. Reduction. K2, again adjusted headcount ratio, reduction. K3, adjusted headcount ratio, reduction. K4 and K5, adjusted headcount ratio did not change. How do you interpret the results? You now know what adjusted headcount ratio is. Yeah?
I think that is not the sensitivity to that is the focus.
What do you mean?
It's the program of the program of the gas transfer, not so much sensitivity to that is focus. That is property is not.
The deprivation focus has counting up to sharing your deprivation figures. Clue. Because of the impact evaluation, we reach somewhere here rather than there. Does it make any sense? Okay, if I choose k equal to 4, what do we get? How many people are who are deprived here? What does k equal to 4 mean in terms of deprivation?
How many people are
Someone? Yes?
deprived of the 4 dimensions?
Deprived in 4 or more non-compliances. So, if you are setting k equal to 4, that means you are then saying, okay, I'm identifying those who have 4 or 5 non-compliances to begin with. So if you focus on those with 4 or 5 non-compliances, did their situation change?
No.
The change is not statistically significant. So those who had 4 or 5 compliances, their situation did not change. Those who had 5 compliances to begin with, did their situation change? No. So what we did, we said, okay, let's focus on those people who are deprived in at least one indicator. Fine, you focus on everybody. At least 2 indicators. Fine, you focus on 2 or more, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then for k equal to 3, you focus on 3, 4, 5. Then for 4, you focus on 4 and 5. Then for 5, you focus on the last, right? For k equal to 1, 2, and 3, reduction is statistically significant. But when you choose k equal to 4, that is focusing on those who had 4 or 5 non-compliances, their situation did not improve. 5 compliances, their situation did not improve. How do you then evaluate the policy? Would you say this was successful reaching poorest of the poor? Tired after lunch? Oh yes, you're tired. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
The program is more sensitive, like for the other people, not.
But that's up to you are again trying to defend the top graph. Top graph we know some indicators changed, some indicators did not. I'm trying to understand the second part of the graph, which is the main contribution of the paper.
It is not
Good.
very,
Sorry?
not very effective in reaching the poor.
Right? So if you had, remember we had x1 and x2 to begin with. So what they have got is someone like this one. So those who had so many non-compliance to begin with, their situation did not improve. Instead of going somewhere like this has reached somewhere like this. This is what is reflected here. 4 or 5 compliances did not change. Does it make sense? Still, yes or no?
Yes.
Who disagrees with that or who still have confusion? I'm happy to explain again.
So in the second one, we have to leave someone behind.
Sorry?
The second one, X2, in which we had to leave someone behind.
We have to leave someone behind.
That person is having the deprivation in all the 3 indicators.
Yes.
We need to leave that person behind because other are very well in the other indicator.
I can understand your logic. Try it again, please.
Like in the X1, that was more distributed, but in X2, there was like one person who is deprived.
In all.
So we have to shift the focus towards those persons who are
What do you mean we have to focus? You started with X. So you start with X. You started with this situation. You can suppose because of it is not that you deliberately go. Suppose you have either gone here or you have gone there. Which one is preferable for you? X1. What I'm trying to say that this Philippine Impact Evaluation Program initially, instead of going there, they have reached somewhere there. Right? Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
You don't have to agree with me only because I'm asking.
Now,
Do you still have confusion? Yes or no? Smiling is not going to help. If no, just say no. That's perfectly fine. Do you still have confusion?
No.
I hear some no. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So this is the finding of the thing. So you are trying to understand whether they have multiply deprived. Those who have multiple non-compliances, their situation improved or not. Now, if you had not left people behind, you would see improvement here and here as well. But we did not observe. So that means poorest of the poor, or those who had, so behavioral changes did not take place for those who had to change a lot of behavior at once. If you had to change, make this, achieve just one compliance, two compliances, fine, they make changes. But if people had to make changes in all these compliances, they did not, maybe because of cash trap, maybe the cash incentive was not enough. Maybe they were farther away from, now that's the next stage of research. If people want, they can try to go ahead and see why it failed in the early part of the program. But these are the tools that you can use to study, impact evaluation of, you can use these multidimensional tools to study impact evaluation in this way.
So can we do joint aggregation there to find out after this one how many are left, and then check it with this one?
See it again. Try it.
Means joint
Louder,
aggregation,
please, a bit.
joint aggregation in like row wise aggregation, and then again to find out how many are left and how it differs from the dimensional.
But this is what I've done, right? Because if you look at how did I obtain them, so I had set a poverty threshold of 4, cutoff of 4. So that means I looked at those who had score of 4 or score of 5, and then I constructed the index, right? This is how M0 is done, right? So I constructed those, and then I checked whether their situation has improved or not. So you can check it just like checking exactly the same idea that I presented in terms of slums, right? We had Mumbai, and then on top we had Delhi, on top we had Kolkata, right? Or for India between 2005 and 1999, 2005, right? And then we reported their change and the confidence interval. Remember? Same idea here. I'm just using on a different context. That's it. Instead of doing the change here using the RCT, randomized control trial data, I'm just looking at whether those changes are statistically significant, the impact evaluation through regression analysis. And it shows that when you have higher poverty cutoff, the things did not change. So they were left behind. So the behavioral changes were possible when you had fewer indicators they had to adapt. But when you had larger indicators to adapt at the same time, their situation did not improve.
So it might be possible they need more incentive so that behavior.
Look, it can be demand side, it can be supply side. Because it is not possible given that they were randomized control trial data, it was not possible for us to go and check how far away the health center was, or the health center had a good number of doctors or nurses. There are anecdotal evidences where, in Latin America, where or in Africa, when women were asked during pregnancy and delivery after birth, they were asked, many of them reported, yes, nurses beat us. That's why rather we have home delivery rather than going there. Or we were asked to wash our clothes after the delivery and everything. So who knows what the reason could be? We do not know. But at least what we know, because one paper can do one thing, we cannot do a lot, right? But at least based on the data, what we observed, those who had larger number of non-compliances, their situation did not. So as if because of the impact evaluation, we ended up here rather than being there. That's what the main finding of the paper. But again, you can use this kind of tools if you are doing impact evaluation for yourself. Make sense? Any other questions? We have 5 more minutes before the session. This session ends. I don't think I have no more slides. This is what it is. So anything on elasticity, anything on impact evaluation,
The CM is related to like one statement.
Control mean. So control mean they have a control and treatment, right? And you are trying to see from control how much it is different to treatment. Yeah, so treatment, so control mean. So this is the adjusted head count ratio for k equal to 1. So for k equal to 1, for the control group, the adjusted head count ratio is 0.36. This much has been the reduction for the treatment group. Similarly, this is for k equal to this. This is control mean. Look, they're going down. The adjusted head count ratio is supposed to go down, right? When you have increasing cutoff, this is the curve you saw. The adjusted head count ratio is going down. Look, the control mean is going down. But then these are changes in the control mean from control to treatment. These are the impact. So these are the estimates of the impact. There you go. Yeah.
The upper figure where we have this attention span. So, what is the difference between?
These are the joint distribution. This is the adjusted head count ratio, and this is the uncensored head count ratio. Do you remember uncensored head count ratio? Don't tell me no. Remember, right? Just raw deprivations. These are the changes in the uncensored head count ratio. So attendance was 45% for control group. Then you had a reduction of around 8 to 12 percentage points. So for treatment group, it was 45. It moved to around 33 or something like that. Yeah. So this is the difference between the control group and the treatment group. But for birth delivery, the control mean was 68%. Some of this did not change. Yeah.
Is there any way of decomposing those text contribution related contribution?
You are going to elasticity.
Contribution to the.
Are you going to elasticity?
No. That is MPA reduction. With the states related contribution to the overall decline in national MPA. Is there any way of decomposing?
Try to phrase taking. Sorry. So you have overall change in MPA.
Yeah.
And
suppose
you have state changes, state reduction, you have national reduction. Then
just a minute. That is contribution of PG states. That's subgroup decomposition which you guys have.
yeah.
Suppose I want see what is such contribution
Overall poverty reduction of MPA of India. You can do is the main problem is that if the population share remain unchanged, that's fine. If the population share they're different across states, sometimes people do Shapley decomposition. Get that. But if because that requires to understand how the population composition over time you see the southern states southern state population share going down, relatively northern states population share is going up. Right? So if the population share doesn't change, you can very clearly show the contribution because the change, the delta will exactly the same. But if the population share is changing, you have to do some kind of Shapley decomposition. But it's possible.
So basically decomposition, basically 2005 what happened.
करना ही नहीं चाहिए
How is it different from Shapley? But some kind of decomposition they do, but it has to be somewhere around Shapley. There is no other way around. Any other questions? No? Do we have tea break or what? Yes. Tea break? Okay. So you can have some tea. And is it a short break or for how long do we have the break? Half an hour? Okay, we have full half an hour.